France, late summer, 1944. After breaking out of Normandy, the U.S. Army was finally doing what it had trained for, moving fast. Sherman tanks rolled down narrow French roads in long, rumbling columns. Infantry rode on the backs of half-tracks. Dust clouds followed entire divisions pushing east. German forces were falling back, and for the first time in months, it felt like the Allies had real momentum. Every mile forward meant one thing. The end of the war was getting closer. But then, something strange started happening. Tanks began stopping along the roads. At first, it was just a few. Crews climbed out, confused, checking engines, tracks, transmissions, but nothing was broken. They had simply run out of fuel. Then, more tanks stopped. Then, entire columns. Soon, roads that had been full of movement were lined with silent armored vehicles. Turrets pointed forward. Crews sitting on hulls. Engines cold. The most powerful army in the world. Stuck. Not because of enemy fire, not because of weather, not because of fear, because of gasoline. Fuel depots were still near the Normandy beaches, but the front lines had raced forward faster than the supply system could keep up. Trucks were too few. Roads were jammed with traffic. Trains couldn't reach the new positions fast enough, and every hour more tanks went dry. German commanders noticed the slowdown. Their resistance stiffened. Counterattacks became bolder. What should have been a fast collapse of enemy lines was turning into a dangerous stall. Far from the front, near a crowded supply yard by the coast, a U.S. Army mechanic named Corporal Danny Russo stood over a line of broken vehicles. Trucks with blown engines. Trucks with shattered axles. Fuel tankers damaged by air attacks. To most officers, it was a graveyard of useless metal. To Danny, a former garage kid from Brooklyn, it looked like something else. It looked like parts. Nearby, he overheard an exhausted officer mutter, "If we can't move fuel, the tanks don't move, and if the tanks don't move, this whole advance slows to a crawl." Danny wiped grease from his hands and stared at the wrecked trucks again, and in that moment, he stopped seeing broken vehicles. He started seeing a solution. The supply yard near the Normandy coast never slept. Engines coughed. Hammers rang. Welders flashed through the night as mechanics tried to keep worn-out vehicles alive. Every truck mattered now. Every working engine meant more fuel might reach the front. Corporal Danny Russo moved between rows of broken machines, grease on his hands, exhaustion in his eyes, but his mind was wide awake. He didn't see junk. He saw pieces of a puzzle, a cracked truck frame that could still carry weight, an engine from a wrecked transport, axles from a vehicle that had hit a mine but left the rear intact, fuel tanks from a destroyed tanker, dented but usable. Nearby, officers argued over maps and supply charts, talking about shipping delays and traffic jams. Danny knelt in the dirt and started sketching with a wrench. Not a normal cargo truck. Something longer, heavier, reinforced. A vehicle built for one job only. Carry as much fuel as possible. A sergeant walked by, stopped, and stared at the rough drawing in the dirt. "Regulations don't cover whatever that is," he said. Danny didn't look up. Regulations don't win wars. Fuel does. That night, he convinced a few other mechanics to stay late. They dragged parts across the yard, cutting, welding, bolting things together that were never meant to fit. Nothing matched perfectly. They improvised, reinforced weak joints with scrap metal, mounted extra fuel tanks along the sides, added support beams under the frame. By dawn, an enormous, ugly, rumbling machine stood in the yard. Too long, too loud, covered in mismatched parts. But when they filled the tanks and checked the suspension, it held. Danny climbed into the driver's seat, heart pounding. It wasn't just a truck, it was a lifeline on wheels. No paperwork, no official approval, just fuel that had to move. By the time Danny's improvised fuel truck was ready, the situation at the front had grown worse. Entire armored units were stalled, waiting, watching the horizon, knowing the enemy wouldn't wait forever. A young lieutenant stood in the supply yard staring at the strange machine. It looked wrong. Too long. Too heavy. Built from parts that had never belonged together. But the fuel tanks were full, and the radios from the front kept repeating the same message. "We are running dry." The lieutenant made a decision. "Send it." Danny climbed into the driver's seat, hands still sore from a night of wrench work. 2 regular fuel trucks joined behind him, their drivers glancing nervously at the oversized creation leading the way. The road east was chaos. Military convoys jammed the highways. Civilians pushed carts along the shoulders. Broken vehicles littered ditches. The sky rumbled now and then with distant aircraft. Danny's truck groaned under the weight. Every bump felt like it might tear the frame apart. The steering wheel shook in his hands. Sweat mixed with dust on his face. Halfway there, they passed a line of silent Sherman tanks pulled off the road. Crews sat on top, watching the convoy like men watching rain clouds after a drought. One tanker driver shouted, "Fuel's coming!" Faces changed instantly. Hope. Hours later, after dodging wrecks and crawling through traffic, the convoy reached a stranded tank battalion. Mechanics and tankers rushed forward before the engines had even stopped. Hoses uncoiled. Fuel caps opened. Gasoline flowed. One by one, Sherman engines roared back to life, the deep rumble echoing across the fields. A tank commander climbed down, slapped the side of Danny's truck, and asked, "Where'd you get this thing?" Danny just grinned. "Built it from what we had." That single run didn't win the war, but it got an entire armored unit moving again. And word started spreading fast. There was a new kind of truck on the road, and it carried the war's most important weapon: fuel. What began as one mechanic's late-night gamble didn't stay a secret for long. After the first successful fuel run, more units started asking the same question. "Can you build another one?" Danny wasn't alone anymore. Mechanics from other depots came to look at the strange, oversized truck. They measured the reinforced frame, studied how extra fuel tanks had been mounted along the sides. Notebooks filled with sketches and rough diagrams. Soon, new versions began appearing. No 2 were identical. Some had extended beds welded from spare frames. Some carried extra fuel drums strapped down with chains. Some had mismatched wheels but stronger suspension. They weren't pretty. They weren't regulation. But they carried fuel. Convoys of these improvised tankers began running day and night from the coast to the advancing front. Military police cleared intersections just to let them through. Drivers slept in their seats between runs. Mechanics rode along with toolkits, fixing breakdowns right on the roadside. Tank crews started calling them something new: the lifeline. Every mile those trucks covered meant engines turning instead of cooling. It meant armored columns pushing forward instead of waiting helplessly. It meant momentum, the one thing the Allies couldn't afford to lose. Months later, as Allied forces pushed deeper into Europe, a senior officer walked through a massive fuel transport yard filled with standardized military tankers. At the edge of the lot sat an old, oil-stained, welded-together monster of a truck. Danny's first one. The officer pointed at it while speaking to a group of young replacements. "See that ugly thing?" he said. "That's what helped keep our tanks moving when everything else failed." Danny Russo never made the newspapers, no parades, no speeches. But every time a column of American tanks rolled forward instead of sitting silent, it was because someone had found a way to get them fuel. And one mechanic proved that sometimes history doesn't change because of a general. Sometimes it changes because of a wrench, a welding torch, and a crazy idea that worked.